Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare. Om Jnana Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Namao Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Vicharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastita Deshutarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivashari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So tonight's theme is the mood of Srila Prabhupada. Thank you all for attending, all my friends and family out there in the cyber world. Thank you for taking the time this evening to join with me in the meditation on the qualities and pastimes of Srila Prabhupada. I want to start off by reading something which I feel is very significant in relationship to Prabhupada. In the Nectar of Devotion, it describes the 9 characteristics of a person who has developed ecstatic love for Krishna. And I want you to hear these and then meditate on what you know of Srila Prabhupada. You know, in terms of, for those of you that are not direct disciples, you're all disciples of him to a degree, shiksha. You're receiving an abundance of shiksha or instructions from Srila Prabhupada through his books and commentaries. So I want you to think about the life and activities of Srila Prabhupada as you know them, and see how relevant this quotation from the Nectar of Devotion is. 9 characteristics of a person who has developed ecstatic love for Krishna. Number 1, he is always anxious to use his time in the devotional service of the Lord. He does not like to be idle. He wants service 24 hours a day without deviation. And when it's referring to service, it means devotional service to the Supreme Lord. Number 2, he is always reserved and perseverant. Number 3, he is always detached from all material attraction. Number 4, he does not long for any material respect in return for his activities. Now we can see, just to pause right there, we can see in those first 2 qualities, anybody that's successful, I think, either materially or spiritually, possesses those qualities. Anxious to use their time in a productive way. And secondly, perseverant, reserved and perseverant. Reserved doesn't necessarily mean you can't be outgoing, but it means that you're thoughtful. And perseverant means to pursue your goals with great amount of determination. So I think that applies to anybody who wants to achieve success. Number 3, he's always detached from all material attraction. I think this is where in bhakti it separates, it becomes a clear distinction, separating from material attraction and attachment. Number 4, he does not long for any material respect in return for his activities. Again, I think this separates, this characteristic, this quality separates one from someone who's materially successful, because in terms of the development of purity and bhakti, one of the primary characteristics or qualities is humility. And we'll speak a little bit about Srila Prabhupada's humility in just a little while. So no desire. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Trinadapi Sunichena, Tarodapi Sahishnana, Amanida, Manadena, Kirtanaya Sadahari. The formula for always being able to chant Harinam, always being able to chant the holy names of the Lord, is tolerance. Humility is the first one. Tolerance, freedom from a desire to be recognized, to have fame, and respect for all living entities. So that's number 4. Does not long for any material respect in return for his activities. That's not the motivation. To get respect, to get... is someone saying something? Okay. I thought I heard someone say something. Number 5, he is always certain that Krishna will bestow his mercy upon him. Number 6, he is always very eager to serve the Lord faithfully. Number 7, he is very much attached to the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. Number 8, he is always eager to describe the transcendental qualities of the Lord. Number 9, he is very pleased to live in a place where the Lord's pastimes are performed. In other words, Mathura, Vrindavan, Dwarka, any of the transcendental holy places, Mayapur, etc. So these 9 characteristics, I think, perfectly exemplify Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada demonstrated. Now, you look. Let's take me for an example. I think I'm probably your stereotypical anti-establishment American hippie generation person who joined the movement. And, as far as I was concerned, prior to my introduction to the Srila Prabhupada via his books, did not want or did not even seek someone to be my guide, my teacher, that person who I would bow down to, that person who I would give my life to in terms of helping with their mission, their goal, their destination. So what is it in Srila Prabhupada that caused someone like me, who may have been a seeker, but certainly my concept of what I was seeking did not include surrender to a teacher, a spiritual mentor, so to speak. Did not include that. That was not on my radar at the time. So what was it that, caused that? What was that transformation caused by? I just want to turn off this fan here. Okay. That was the source of the white noise. It kind of crept back into the ether here. So what was it that was the cause? I want to say one of the many things. Number 1 was the knowledge that Srila Prabhupada was giving via his books. The first book that I got from Srila Prabhupada, not directly, but through one of his disciples, was called Reservoir of Pleasure. I don't know how many of you have read that or have seen that. It was just a pamphlet, basically. I was on my way to a job in Ithaca, New York at the Cornell University. And I was taking a bus there because my vehicle wasn't working. So I hopped on a bus at Penn Station and I received one of these Reservoir of Pleasures, these pamphlets, which had a beautiful picture of Krishna on the front and a beautiful picture of Prabhupada on the back. And so that ride, I think from New York City to Ithaca, New York, is about a 4 or 5 hour trek. And during that ride, I had ample time to both sleep and to read. So I did both. And certainly because I had this pamphlet, and I was at the time, as I said, a seeker. I had recently graduated from Albright College, as my bio indicated, and I was teaching and playing music and for a living. And one of the things that I was doing at that time is I was exploring various traditions and various sacred writings. I was reading the Compassionate Teachings of Buddha. I was reading Taoism, so many different things like that. So when I got this Reservoir of Pleasure, certainly it's what Srila Prabhupada said in there, but even more importantly, that it was the mood, it was the kindness and the compassionate nature that came through Prabhupada's writings. And later on, we'll also talk about the compassionate nature of Srila Prabhupada, as well as his humility, his kirtan and his thoughts on kirtan, and his humor. So I was able to detect a certain personality. A good writer, one of the things they teach you when you're writing is to understand that you have a voice and to allow that voice to come through, not to sound contrived. So the voice of Srila Prabhupada was full of compassion and kindness and very exacting articulation of the principles of Bhakti Yoga, which I wasn't getting from other things that I was reading. I was reading things and it sounded vague or nebulous or inaccessible to where I was coming from at the time. But with Srila Prabhupada, not only was the kindness and compassion prevalent in his voice, his written voice, writing voice, but also the articulation of what is bhakti, what is our position as souls, and how bhakti allows us to revive and reconnect with our constitutional position as spirit souls. All these things came through in that short pamphlet. You should read it if you get an opportunity, Reservoir of Pleasure. And from there, I was able to, I came in contact coincidentally or not so coincidentally, because everything is in divine order and everything is working under this divine order. So not so coincidentally, I'll say, on my journey back from Ithaca to Port Authority, I received from another devotee, disciple of Srila Prabhupada, another book, and this was Srila Prabhupada's translation of Bhagavad-Gita. I had read Bhagavad-Gita before as a student at Albright College in one of my courses, epic poetry courses, and I had already read Bhagavad-Gita, and I was already impressed by Bhagavad-Gita. But it was a very, very whittled down version of Bhagavad-Gita. So when I got this substantial hardcover Bhagavad-Gita full with Sanskrit and Sanskrit transliterations and commentaries and the works, I was just like, whoa, now I'm really diving deep into this sacred text known as Bhagavad-Gita. And by reading that sacred text, again, two things came across. Prabhupada's voice of kindness and compassion, and also his ability to articulate the principles of Bhakti Yoga as spoken by Krishna in the Bhagavad-Gita. So those things came very, very clearly to me through Prabhupada's books. As time wore on, and as I began to read more and more of the Bhagavad-Gita and become more and more convinced of what Bhagavad-Gita was saying, but more importantly, I was becoming more and more convinced that this personality who had translated this book, Bhagavad-Gita, and written those commentaries was the person that I felt was now my teacher. I wanted this person as my teacher. So it was around fall of 70, fall of 72, I believe it was. Summer of 72, when I started going to the Brooklyn Temple on Henry Street. and met devotees, took prasadam, the whole 9 yards. And then I met a friend of mine, and coincidentally, he was also getting into Bhagavad-Gita and Krishna consciousness. And from there, it became history. We met Naranjan Swami and joined. But the things that began to unfold, reveal themselves to me, was who this person, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, was or is, really who he is. And I began to glean certain things about his characteristics, his qualities, and understand about him as a person. Because the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, the philosophy coming to us from Bhagavad-Gita, is highly personal. And what I mean that, I mean that on all levels. It's personal to me as an individual, to you as an individual, but it's also personal in relationship to the goal where Gita, Bhagavad-Gita, and Srila Prabhupada's instructions are pointing us to. And that is to a personal, an actual loving, highly individualistic and personal relationship with God. So I was beginning to get a sense of Srila Prabhupada's mood. Now, I was very fortunate. What was my good fortune? My good fortune was the fact that I actually officially became a part of ISKCON in '73. I was already following the principles and chanting 16 rounds a day and reading Bhagavad-Gita and having some association with devotees. I was already doing that, but in '73 I officially became a part of ISKCON when I joined the Radha Damodar Traveling Sankirtan Party, which many of you may have heard of or read about, and that basically was a school bus that was renovated into a temple. So it was a temple on 4 wheels in the guise of a school bus, and we went all over the country, mostly to places that didn't have temples and didn't know much about Krishna or the devotees or Prabhupada. And I had the good fortune of traveling with Naranjan Swami. And basically my service was to do kirtan and to eat the wonderful prasadam that was being offered to Radha Damodar. And I have Radha Damodar with me, right next to me. They guide me every day. They give me strength and encouragement every day. So Naranjan Swami embodied as a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, as a very early disciple of Srila Prabhupada. He embodied a lot of the qualities of Srila Prabhupada himself. But even more importantly than that, Naranjan Swami really, really loved Srila Prabhupada and really was dedicated to Srila Prabhupada. So he was able to, due to his intimate association with Srila Prabhupada from a very, very early stage of the ISKCON movement, 1968 is when he joined in San Francisco, and Prabhupada was there at the Haight-Ashbury Temple. He was able to tell us a lot about Srila Prabhupada. And one of the first things that he, the understanding that he gave us of Srila Prabhupada was the mood in Kirtan. And I wanted to relay that to you because I think to a certain degree, this mood may be fading a little bit because, you know, I see, especially a lot of younger devotees are very, very adept musicians. They have great voices and a real understanding of melody and rhythm. But I do see certain things that are a little troubling to me, and certain things that Prabhupada was very specific, you know, in terms of his emphasis on kirtan. And I'll go on those points and maybe even relay a few stories about that, which makes me feel very confident in saying this. Of course, on the other hand, some of the devotees, these younger devotees, are so pure in heart. I just say to myself, they're on another level that I'm not on. So, you know, there's no criticism from my part. It's just, you know, certain things that I've understood from the mood of Srila Prabhupada in Kirtan. One of the things that I know, and it was reinforced by Vishnu John Swami's Prabhupada's mood when he approached Kirtan, he always started Kirtan slowly and very meditatively, so that we had the opportunity to hear very intensely the mantra, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and to meditate on that mantra, and not even be so much concerned with the musicality or the performance of the kirtan. Even though Vishnu John Swami was an extraordinarily wonderful harmonium player, and basically any instrument that he touched, he was able to play very adeptly, and his voice was very good, very sweet, very deep, very melodious. But the mood that he conveyed was, Prabhupada's approach to kirtan. Kirtan is a meditation. Kirtan is not a performance. Kirtan is not entertainment. Just like, people go on retreats. I know a lot of people here in Puerto Rico that are interested in yoga. They go on retreats in Mexico, and they go on these silent retreats, where they don't speak for a couple of days. And, they just meant to meditate deeply, profoundly on certain subject matter. So kirtan is a meditation, a deep, profound meditation. So what I've understood, the mood of Srila Prabhupada, and what you can hear when you listen to a kirtan by Prabhupada, is he starts slowly, and then he gradually, the ecstasy, the emotion, the connection, builds and builds to greater heights, both in speed and instrumentation, etc. So that's one thing. The other thing I want to say is that Prabhupada, and I'm going to relay to you two stories which backs up what I have to say. He did not like alaps so much. And alap is, basically when you do certain, fancy things with your vocal, with your voice, that kind of thing. He did not like that. And there's two stories that I will relate to you that kind of demonstrate that. And there's a lot more. I think Jayadvaita Maharaj, Bhakti Charu Swami can relate or have related many stories that also underscore this particular point. There was a godbrother of mine. I won't mention his name. He's actually deceased now, so I still won't mention his name. But he had an itch. He was a musician. Prior to the movement, he was a musician. When he came to the movement, I met him. We were Sankirtan buddies. We went on Sankirtan together. We developed a close relationship. After a period of time, he decided to go to India and to study classical Indian music, which he did. He learned sitar and vocals. So one time he was in the temple in Vrindavan, and he was doing a bhajan there in the temple, and it was going over the loudspeakers. And as you know, Prabhupada's quarters are right next to the temple, so he could hear what was going on in the temple. And he heard this devotee chanting, and he was using like these kind of classical alaps and different kinds of intonations and bending of notes and things like that. And Prabhupada, he was doing something. I think he was either writing or reading or something, and he heard this and he said, "Who is that? Who is it? Tell him to stop immediately." So the person that Prabhupada was speaking to was a disciple. He knew immediately who it was, and he ran into the temple room and he said, "Stop! Prabhupada does not like what you're doing." So that was one story. Another story is they had the management at Mayapur had a festival, a Harinam festival, and they wanted to be inclusive. So they invited a lot of the kirtan groups of local Bengal and Bangladesh, and many kirtan groups came to this Harinam festival, and they performed kirtan, and they were very good. They were very. If you've ever heard a Bengali kirtaniya, sing, one of my favorites is a disciple of Bhakti Charu Swami. His name is Gadadhar. He has such a sweet, heart-melting voice. And if you ever hear him sing, you know, there's that sweetness in terms of the Bengali style of kirtan. And so many of these kirtan groups came, but unfortunately some of them were professional, and Prabhupada did not like singing for your japatis or speaking for your japatis. So there were performances, and when these groups came on and they were doing and holding the note and doing all these alaps and, you know, doing all kinds of things, Prabhupada was not happy at all. And he told them, you know, never again, do not do this again. So, I mean, those are two stories I can tell you from my own opinion. So I think the important thing is when we approach our meditation, especially through the medium of kirtan, that we do it very simply. It's a very simple, meditative approach with a heart full of humility and pridelessness. And I think that was the mood that Srila Prabhupada conveyed through his own kirtan, and that was what he conveyed to us in terms of performance of kirtan. So this is very important, and you know, we don't have to possess a great amount of musicianship. Certainly, I'm not a great musician. All I try to do is to sing from the heart and to keep in mind what Srila Prabhupada conveyed as far as his mood towards kirtan. I'll give you another story that happened to me personally. Every time I think of it, you know, my hair kind of stands on end. It was in 1977, end of October. Prabhupada was very ill at the time. I was blessed with the service of for Srila Prabhupada from 12 midnight to 3 a.m. in the morning. Bhavananda Prabhu gave me that opportunity, that service. So I would go into his room. It was very dimly lit. Srila Prabhupada was in bed. And at that time, he was very near to leaving this world. So he was emaciated and very weak at that point. And Bhavananda said, you know, Prabhupada likes to hear kirtan all through the day. So I felt, oh my God, so blessed that I had the opportunity to sing for Srila Prabhupada. So I was singing, and I thought, let me be really simple and just do a melody that's not complicated. So I started singing, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I was singing that one evening, and maybe I was an hour and a half. I was to do 3 hours of solid kirtan, maybe an hour and a half into it. And you know, sometimes your mind gets restless when you're doing kirtan. You're thinking, you know, maybe I should change it up a little bit. So at that time, there was a mantra going around that became popular, and I later found out that Prabhupada did not like it at all. But it was Brahma Bole, Chaturmukhe, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Mahadeva, Panchamukhe, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I don't know why. Just at the blink of an eye, at the whim of the mind, I went into that song. And, you know, I thought Prabhupada was like sound asleep, and I was just providing background music. Immediately, I want to say 5 seconds into that, Prabhupada's hand went up. And Bhavananda was there, you know, he saw Prabhupada was going, stop. He didn't say that, but the gesture was like a policeman who's in a traffic circle and says, stop. And Prabhupada says, and Bhavananda said, and then I went, Hare Krishna, Hare. And I can tell you, I did not deviate from that melody anymore. I just felt like better to be safe than to be sorry. So I know that's an important thing, you know, in terms of kirtan with Prabhupada. And Prabhupada liked the emphasis. He preferred emphasizing the Mahamantra, the Hare Krishna Mahamantra in kirtan, the Panchatattva mantra before, so that we are allowed entrance into Radha Krishna and glorifying Radha Krishna. And of course, we begin everything with the pranams to the spiritual master, because it is by the spiritual master's grace that we are allowed to enter deeply into kirtan. So that was profound. So that's a little bit about Prabhupada's mood towards kirtan. Devotee qualification. Prabhupada did not like criticism of other devotees. He did not like even more senior devotees to criticize younger devotees. He just saw the good in everyone, and he recognized sincerity. When he saw sincerity, when he detected sincerity in a person, Prabhupada had three things that he did. He always enthused, I call them the 3 E's. And when I teach or when I go to a teacher, I look for these 3 E's in education. Enthusiasm. Is the teacher enthusing you as a student? Is the teacher encouraging you as a student? Is the teacher empowering you as a student? So with Srila Prabhupada, he always enthused, encouraged, and empowered his disciples. So he did not like when a devotee, a so-called senior devotee, would criticize a junior devotee for this or for that. And he would always throw it back at the devotee who was lodging the criticism. You know, what have you done? What are you? He is trying. She is trying. And he would always make it apparent or make it clear that maybe you are projecting onto this other devotee what you yourself possess. So that was one thing. And another thing I can see, and I think you know, there's a few examples in our movement that exemplify this. You look at you listen to the story of Shruti Kirti and how he became Prabhupada's assistant. I don't know how many of you know that story, but Shruti Kirti was in the movement 16 months. You know, he in Philadelphia, you know, kind of the same pattern, you know, kind of anti-authoritarian type of person, and, you know, same kind of pattern of behavior that I had, and a lot of us who joined the movement at that time. And so he was in the movement 16 months, and he was doing very simple, humble service in New Vrindavan at the time. He was cooking, and he was in, you know, the kitchen most of the time. He had some association with Srila Prabhupada for a week in Los Angeles when he and Kirtananda went to see Srila Prabhupada. He got to read to Srila Prabhupada Krishna book every evening. So he had some nice association that gave him a real strong taste of Prabhupada and his mood, and his kind and gentle mood, his compassionate nature. So when Shruti Kirti went back to New Vrindavan, Prabhupada came a few weeks later to New Vrindavan, and he wasn't really able to get that much association, if any, because he was doing his seva, he was doing his service. And so one morning, Kirtananda came into Shruti Kirti, and he said to Shruti Kirti, how would you like to be Srila Prabhupada's servant, assistant? And Shruti Kirti said, me? And Kirtananda said, yes, you. So he said, yes, I would love to do that. I would love to do that. So we see here was, you know, relatively speaking, he was a very junior devotee of the time. There were far more senior devotees than him at the time, devotees who had joined in 67, 68, 69, 70. But somehow or another, Shruti Kirti was selected. And one of the reasons he was selected is because Kirtanananda recognized in him his sincerity and his humility, his willingness to serve. Service to serve was not a big deal for him. There was not a lot of mental blocks or obstacles. So that was recognized, and Shrutakirti went on to become Srila Prabhupada's assistant for over 2.5 years. And as a result of that service, we get a lot of intimate details about Srila Prabhupada, his mood, his qualities, his characteristics, some of the things that he did during that 2.5-year period. So you can look from one vantage point. Oh, not a very advanced devotee, not a very, in the movement very long, but Prabhupada was able to see the qualification of the heart. Two other examples would be, that immediately come to mind, would be Radhanath Swami. I met Radhanath Swami in 1973 when I went to New Vrindavan with Vishnu Jan Swami. And here he was a very simple, humble brahmachari who lived in this shack. Literally, it was a shack, and he did deity worship practically all day, and he read Srila Prabhupada's books at that time, and engaged in studying the books and giving classes. And so at that time when I met Radhanath Swami, he was Radhanath Brahmachari, and a very humble devotee. And still to this day, he reflects that kind of sincerity and humility, which has allowed him to touch the hearts of so many thousands of people. And the other person I always like to think about, there are a lot of my God brothers and God sisters that bring this to the forefront. But one is Naranjan Swami. When I was temple president in 55th Street, Naranjan Swami was there. He was Naranjan Brahmachari at the time, and he was the head of the Bhakta program. He was responsible for training new people in the principles and the practice of Bhakti Yoga. And Naranjan Swami was always so humble and so genuine a person. And he was always interested in Prabhupada's books. And so I guess the moral of this part of my story about Srila Prabhupada is we should be very careful when we're dealing with devotees, or anybody for that matter, because we just don't know who they are. We don't know, when and where they're going to blossom into this butterfly of devotion. They can come from this caterpillar-like stage and eventually blossom into a beautiful butterfly with a heart full of devotion. So we just don't know. So to try to categorize devotees in this way or that way, or even people who are expressing interest, we have to be very careful because we just don't know who they are. We should treat everyone with all respect and with all humility. And this will allow us to grow. This will allow us to also eventually blossom our own devotional creeper. Prabhupada's mood. Again, Prabhupada's humor. Prabhupada was a very witty man. Of course, he was a very intelligent person, but he was always a very witty, funny individual also. Shrutakirti tells the story when he first became Prabhupada's disciple, Prabhupada's assistant. One of the duties of the assistant is that when Prabhupada needed help, he would have a bell. Prabhupada would have a bell, and he would ring the bell. And the assistant would be in another room within earshot of the bell. And when they heard the bell, they would come in, and then Prabhupada would tell them, what assistance he needed at the time. So Shrutakirti was brand new. He hadn't had the experience of Prabhupada ringing the bell yet. That's how new he was. Finally, the first time Prabhupada rang the bell. It was Kshuti Kirti's first opportunity to serve his spiritual master. And, he goes running through the door, he pays his obeisances, and then he gets up, and Prabhupada's there with a smile, and he said, and Shruti Kirti says, yes, Srila Prabhupada, what can I do? And Prabhupada said to him, I just wanted to see how fast your reactions were. So Shruti Kirti was like, a little test by Guru. There's another incident. Ravindra Sarup tells this story. Prabhupada was a pretty outspoken individual. I mean, you knew where he was at, especially if he did not agree with you, or you were promoting yourself as maybe something you weren't. And so Prabhupada, in the course of his life, met with a lot of very important, influential people in the academic world, in the political arena, wealthy people, business people, et cetera, et cetera. He was in Philadelphia. Ravindra Sarup, who was I think a PhD recipient at the time. I think he had already received his PhD, or was very close to receiving his PhD, and was a disciple of Srila Prabhupada. And so he arranged a meeting between Srila Prabhupada and an Indian professor at university, I think it was Temple University. And that Indian professor, he was also a PhD, his specialty was Hinduism. So he met with Srila Prabhupada, and the first thing Prabhupada asked him was, he said, so, you are a professor? And the man said, yes, I am. He said, so you hold a PhD? And the man said, yes, I do. And so Prabhupada said, you teach Hinduism, about Hinduism? And the man said, yes, that's my specialty. So then Prabhupada said, what is your definition of Hinduism? So there was a moment of silence. And the man said, well, you can't really define Hinduism. So Prabhupada kind of cocked his head like he did, and he says, you cannot define Hinduism? And then the man said, no, you really can't define Hinduism. So Prabhupada said, how can you teach Hinduism? You don't even know how to define Hinduism. So the man was all flustered, and Prabhupada had a way of doing that to people, getting them flustered. Prabhupada also told a lot of, and probably those of you from India would recognize the Gopal Bond stories. So Prabhupada would use these stories at different times to underscore a particular philosophical point that he made. And I don't have any at my fingertips right now, but they were usually quite humorous, as the Gopal Bond stories tend to be. Another instance, Prabhupada was very affectionate and very joking with his disciples. And one time, Tamal Krishna Maharaj came into the room, and he paid his obeisances, his respects. And then when Srila Prabhupada looked, he saw, and he started rubbing Tamal Krishna Maharaj's head, and he said, oh, you are going bald. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj got a little embarrassed. And Prabhupada said, that is very auspicious. He said, you do not have much to shave off. So I've always told people, when they say to me, you keep yourself bald. I said, oh, it is very auspicious. I'm going bald, and it's very auspicious to be bald. So I take that from the Tamal Krishna Maharaj story. One time, and this story, I was personally present, so I can verify it. The Radha Damodar traveling party had grown to be around 65 brahmacharis and maybe a dozen sannyasis. And we all met with Srila Prabhupada at the Atlanta Temple. He was visiting the Atlanta Temple. We all went there, and we had scheduled a scheduled meeting with Srila Prabhupada. So we all went, and we were all sitting there. And one of the things that we wanted to do, because the Radha Damodar party was very adept at distributing Prabhupada's books And the party was able, for the BBT, the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, Srila Prabhupada's book publishing company, was able to make large donations to that book trust, so that there would be a continuation of printing of Srila Prabhupada's books. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he and Naranjan Swami at the time were in charge of the party. So they wanted to make an offering, Srila Prabhupada, of $100,000 for the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. So what they did is they gathered in cash. I think there were $1,000 bills at the time. I think there were $1,000 bills. And they wanted to present it to Srila Prabhupada like that, to make an offering. And so we all knew about this, so we were eagerly awaiting to see Prabhupada's pleasure. And the real thing about this is Prabhupada never kept anything for himself. That was another very inspiring thing. Oftentimes people would give him gifts of rings, valuable rings. One time Kirtananda gave him an emerald in gold, in gold setting, and Prabhupada looked at the ring and said, "Very beautiful. Here, give this to Krishna." I think he was in the Bombay temple at the time. So, many times like that. So we wanted to see Prabhupada's reaction. We knew he was very pleased when the book publishing was being properly financed. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj gave Srila Prabhupada the $100,000. I think it was $100,000 bills, from my recollection. So Prabhupada took the stack of bills and he did something very unusual. He put the stack to his ear, and he went, sometimes like you do with cards. So Prabhupada went through the whole stack, and he had a quizzical look on his face, and he looked at Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and he said, 100,000? And like asking, "Are you sure there's $100,000 here?" And Tamal Krishna, we didn't know this, the brahmacharis that were sitting there. Tamal Krishna Maharaj was sitting there, and then he got this like terrified look on his face, because what had happened prior, there was they didn't have 100,000. They had to scrape together some extra cash from different places to make an additional $1,000, and then someone had to run and get the $1,000 bill at the bank, and then they had to run back, and they gave it to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and he put it in his pocket. He neglected to put it into the stack. So when Prabhupada did that, 100,000, Tamal Krishna Maharaj realized that he had neglected to put the additional bill to make $100,000. So I found that to be a very funny, very interesting perspective of Srila Prabhupada, that he was able to, just by doing that, to understand that no, there's not exactly 100,000. One time Brahmananda, as you all know, is a very big man, and he would easily gain weight. He was very kupfic, kapha disposition, and he quite often would go on diets. So one time he was with Srila Prabhupada, and he said, "Srila Prabhupada, I'm on a diet now. I'm trying to lose some weight because I'm getting too big." And he said, and Prabhupada said, wasn't much interested in that. He said, "Oh, okay." And he says, Srila Prabhupada. So he was like starting to brag a little bit, Brahmananda. He said, I'm eating chapati, but I'm not even putting ghee on the chapati. And Prabhupada looked at him and he said, "How will you digest that?" Brahmananda. So that was another little tale of. There are other instances. The last one I'll tell you, Rasagya tells the story of when the Govinda players. Prabhupada loved plays about Krishna. He more than anything else, I've seen so much emotional reaction from Srila Prabhupada when he would see his disciples put on plays that glorified Krishna or Lord Ramchandra. And two instances of this. One told by Rasagya, and the second one I personally witnessed at the 55th Street Temple in New York City. In Mayapur, the Govinda players, they were the New York City troupe from the New York Temple, and they were very good. Rasagya and her husband were both professional actor and actress, and there were other devotees who had acting experience. So they were very good and at what they did and how they presented the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. So they were doing the Ramayana, an excerpt of the Ramayana in the Mayapur temple, and Prabhupada was sitting there. And he wasn't feeling very well. But the thing that he was doing, he was coming down every evening to see the Govinda players put on their play. So they were doing particularly the excerpt of Suparnika as she meets Ramchandra and Lakshman, and that whole thing, that whole exchange, and how she goes for Ram, and she tries to seduce him, and Ram says, "No, I'm not worthy. I'm married. My brother's handsome." So Prabhupada was laughing and laughing, and he was laughing so hard, he was slapping his thighs, and he was standing up, and he was really enjoying and the devotees were actually, Rasagya, as she tells the story, she said when she looked out at the audience, no one was looking at the players. They were all looking at Srila Prabhupada and his reaction to the play. And then at the end of that play, Prabhupada stood up and he gave a standing ovation. And the one that I witnessed was, again, with the Govinda players at the theater. We had a theater at the 55th Street Temple, and they put a play on called The Age of Kali, and there was the personification of Kali and a personality called Sin. So Rasagya, who's a very attractive, blonde-haired, blue-eyed German girl who was raised in the United States, and she was the actress, she played Sin. And she had a black dress on, and she acted, very much like what you think the personification of Sin would act like, very sensual and, very attractive. So one of the sannyasis, who there wasn't liking, how Rasagya was actually, he leaned over to Srila Prabhupada and he said, "This is not appropriate. The way she's acting, she's going to agitate the minds of all the brahmacharis." And Prabhupada said, "Oh no, she is very good." He said, "If you are agitated by this play, then you should go to the forest." So immediately, sannyasi was put into his place. So I want to move on to Prabhupada's compassion. And can someone tell me what time this normally ends? So I don't want to hold you all up. I know you all have work tomorrow and responsibilities. Ramchandra, can you tell me? Can you unmute yourself and tell me? Is it usually an hour? Am I going over here?
It's an hour, but you could finish the last.
Okay. All right. Well,
please go ahead.
Well, yeah. There's a lot of things, but two things. But let me deal with Prabhupada's humility, his mood of humility. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Trinadapi Sunichina. So humility, tolerance, freedom from false prestige, respect to all living entities. In such a state of mind, you can chant Hare Krishna constantly. You can do Kirtan constantly. Srila Prabhupada, as we all know now, and as we begin to mature as devotees, we see more and more how pure a devotee of Krishna he actually is. And the more we hear of things that he did at the time, the more we see of his humility. You've all heard when Srila Prabhupada first started the Hare Krishna movement, ISKCON, and young men and women were coming, young hippies, dropouts, college graduates, social workers. There were people coming from every walk of life, and Prabhupada used to cook for them, and then he would personally serve out prasadam. And even in the beginning days, there was only one bathroom. Prabhupada would wait at the end of the line to get into the bathroom and to shower and all these things. So we didn't recognize who Prabhupada was at the time, but certainly we now realize that here this very powerful emissary of Krishna consciousness was possessed of divine humility. One Vyas Puja celebration to Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Prabhupada gave a very famous discourse on the glories of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And Prabhupada was saying, you know, it is not me. Who knew? Who knew that I would come to the Western world? Who knew that I would meet young men and women who would give their lives for the propagation of the holy name? Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and my Guru Maharaj directly sent you all. And Prabhupada was going on, and with tears in his eyes, choked up with emotion, he was feeling so genuinely insignificant, even though at the time, I think it was around 1975, 76, already in just 9-10 years, he had achieved so much. He was feeling so humbled, you know, by the meditation on the greatness of his spiritual teacher, that he was literally weeping. He was coming to tears, and out of gratitude. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but it's a very powerful emotion, gratitude, to the degree that you start crying, that you're so grateful, you're feeling so blessed. And Prabhupada was demonstrating that. So Prabhupada also, it's tradition in India, when you were considered a great saint, a great sadhu, a great sage, people want to bend down and touch your feet. Prabhupada did not like that. He did not want people touching his feet. He tried to avoid that as much as possible. Another thing, in another Vyas Puja, another time, this was Prabhupada, our Prabhupada's Vyas Puja in London, senior devotees were glorifying Prabhupada. So as soon as finished, you know, that is the tradition in terms of Vyas Puja, that the student talks about the greatness of his teacher, and the teacher hears that and appreciates that gratitude and respect, that exchange of gratitude and respect. But as soon as his disciples, the students stopped, and Prabhupada started glorifying his disciples. And one that I remember, and particularly that he glorified, was Pradumya. And I don't know if any of you have met Pradumya, but he's about as humble a person as you can get. And his knowledge of Bhakti Shastra, the scriptures, the Bhakti scriptures, there is nobody in ISKCON, in the Hare Krishna movement. There are very few scholars that have as much knowledge as Pradumya. And Pradumya was helping Srila Prabhupada in the Sanskrit editing. And so Prabhupada began to glorify Pradumya. He lived so simply. He and his wife are just working in service to me and the production of my books. And he went down, he was glorifying his devotees in that way. So he was always able to see that people were doing so much. And that is a symptom of someone who's advanced. He's free from self-centeredness, from selfishness. And therefore, the more you get away from self-centeredness and selfishness, the more you can see the good and the greatness in others. And Prabhupada had that ability. He really, truly appreciated and was grateful for everything that his students were doing. Not only students, but academicians who had appreciation for Prabhupada and his books. Many people on down the line, Prabhupada showed an immense amount of gratitude in a very humble state of mind. So I'll stop here. I've gone over a little bit, only because I started late. But I thank you all very much for being here with me. And listening to me share with you a little bit the mood of Srila Prabhupada. It was the tip of the iceberg. I conclude by saying Prabhupada's ability to deal with different devotees in different ways was unsurpassed. When you needed firm to be dealt with firmly, and that inspired you, Prabhupada was right there. But if you couldn't handle that and you needed gentle guidance, Prabhupada was right there. And Shruti Kirti once said, he quoted Prabhupada as saying, keep doing your service, your bhakti, and everything will be all right. So my parting words to you is, you may be having this difficulty and that difficulty, but keep doing your service. Keep straight on the path. As the Buddha said, when you're facing in the right direction, just keep walking. So whatever obstacles may be in your path, Krishna and Srila Prabhupada will help you to overcome them. You'll see them as challenges that are meant for your growth. Krishna does not do things to you. He does things for you. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you so much. You all have a happy, healthy, and holy year this year. Stay safe. And every morning, I'm going to throw a plug in for this. Every morning I have Kirtan from 7:30 to 7:45 on Facebook Live. Just go to my page, my Facebook page, and join me in Kirtan every morning, 7 days a week. We've been doing it since the pandemic started. And I've recorded possibly about 110 different melodies, Hare Krishna melodies. And I've done that purposely so that there could be a chronicle of different melodies, a lot of old melodies. So again, thank you very much. Hare
Roji,
Krishna.
Can you take some questions?
If you like, sure.
Yeah,
I'm here for it.
please. We'll open
Okay.
the floor. If anybody has a question, you could raise your hand or type it in the chat box.
Can I get them on the screen so I can speak? Okay, because it's just double me, and I'm a little tired of looking at me.
Since you requested, I'm sure devotees will come and honor your request by coming on the screen.
Okay, great. Thank you. I have Prabhupada here and Radhaswami here, but I'd like to see some of the devotees. Okay, question?
Abhay Krishna has a question. Please go ahead, Abhay.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you for the wonderful class.
Hare Krishna.
I had a small question about when you were talking about how Prabhupada didn't like when people or devotees touched his feet. So why was it like that, Prabhuji? Why was Prabhupada never fond of that? Because when I was reading Radhaswami Maharaj's book, when Radhaswami Maharaj first touched Prabhupada's feet, was about and then one of his disciples said Prabhupada doesn't like, no one touches Prabhupada's feet. I was like, when I first read it, it felt like it hit hard. So I was like, why? So that's my question.
Why Prabhupada did not like for them to touch his feet? One thing that Prabhupada said in that relation, one very practical thing that he said in regards to that, is he says that when they do that, they're giving you their karma. So he didn't want that exchange, especially in India, when a sadhu walks through a crowd of people, everyone's bowing down and trying to touch the feet of a sadhu. That was the first reason that he explained. And the second reason, I just think that Prabhupada, personally, is my personal opinion, Prabhupada, like I said, he had an immense amount of humility. And I just think he didn't feel comfortable with that, and that kind of exchange. So those are my two reasons. One, I know for sure. The other one is my speculation. The Prabhupada mentioned, Shruti Kirti mentioned that in one of his conversations about Srila Prabhupada. Other question?
Anybody else? Please raise your hand or type your question. Prabhuji, I have one story that I had heard about when you were arrested and put in jail. I forgot that. Could you, if you do not mind, can you say if...
Which time? I was put in jail many times on the streets distributing books. The one time I remember telling, maybe it was in Memories, it was in Atlanta, and we were chanting, you know, especially I started my Krishna conscious career distributing books in Alabama, Georgia, and Louisiana in the early 70s. So, you know, put that into context. So I was arrested in New Orleans. I was arrested in Birmingham, Alabama. I was arrested in Tennessee. And this particular time that I related to, because it was a wonderful experience, it was in Atlanta. We were chanting. We used to bring the Radha Damodar deities out with us. So we were on a street corner in downtown Atlanta. And all of a sudden, you know, we were doing Kirtan. Radha Damodar was there on their palanquin. We were doing Kirtan. And all of a sudden, it was as if a bank was being robbed. You know, paddy wagons, cop cars, motorcycle police. You know, it was like this whole battalion of the police force pulled up, and basically they arrested everyone that was on the Sankirtan party. They put us in paddy wagons. They shipped us off to jail, and we were there for a period of time, and I think overnight. So we were thrown into this like big cell because there was maybe 10 or 12 of us, and a holding cell, I think it was called. And there was a guy there who was asleep. I think he was arrested for vagrancy because he was drunk. So he was asleep the whole time, and it was daytime. And coming through, there was just a little window. Maybe it was, you know, maybe 12, 16 inches wide, and maybe 2 feet high. And that was the only outside light that we got. So it kind of came in a stream of sunlight. So this guy was sleeping, and there was a devotee. He was a grihasta. He was dressed all in white. He had blonde hair. He had a long sika, shaved clean, and he was standing. I guess he wanted to sunbathe. He was standing there, and he was chanting, you know, very softly and very sweetly. He was chanting japa. So you can imagine this glowing white, blonde-haired being who looks like an angel was there, and this guy was asleep. And he wakes up, and that's the first thing he sees. And he said, "Oh my God, I've died. I'm dead. And there's an angel here. There's an angel here." You know, we all started laughing. So that was one experience that I had, you know, with one of the cellmates there, thinking that the devotee was an angel and he had died. Any other questions or observations? Or
if in today's day and age, where the in the internet age, where all the databases are so integrated, right? You could do a crime in another part of the world, and it could show up in another country's database.
Sure.
And wherever you go, there is background checks. So considering, let's say, if you were in college, you just graduated, and you're going to be working, and you met the Hare Krishnas. In today's day and age, knowing that if you were caught, if police comes to you, it goes into your record, and that means your job and everything could jeopardize. Would you do that again? Meaning go
yes,
in.
I would.
Okay.
I mean, you're talking to me. So my answer would be yes, I would do it again. I was a rebel. And I guess even at 70 years old, I remain a rebel. So yes, I would do it again. That doesn't mean that you would do it again. Of course, at the time, I was a brahmachari. I did not have wife and children, but I have wife and children now. And would I do it again? Yeah, I do it. I do go out on Harinam. Of course, things have changed. You know, Hare Krishnas have become familiar. Here in Puerto Rico and New York City, different places. So it is a different time, a different age, and because of the internet, you know, people are far more aware. Here in Puerto Rico, I have not found, the Puerto Rican people are so sweet and beautiful, lovely people. I have not found any kind of, you know, resistance to who I am and what I'm about. So I don't think I would ever get arrested here for any reason. But in answer to your question, yes, I would do it, even if I ran that risk. Any other questions?
Yeah. Anybody else?
Hey, don't blame me, you know, if somehow or another your job gets jeopardized. I don't want to hear any complaint. Lakshmi told me he would do it. I'm going to do it. No.
I would do it. I
that's-
would do it. I just haven't been approached by police yet, but I wouldn't mind
You know,
making.
it's interesting you mentioned that, because I did have to get an FBI. I guess it was for a job. When I taught in West Orange, I did have to get FBI clearance, and there was something on my, yeah, it was for a license, for my teacher's license, and there was something on there, and you know, it said if you had any question, you contact this particular agent, and I did, and I explained to him everything, and they deleted it. They said, no, this is not the kind of thing that we're looking for, so this should not be on here. And you know, I actually called, it was a long time ago, and I called the police department that they were referring. It wasn't the FBI who deleted it. I actually called the police department, and this happened way back. And I spoke to a lady there. She was public relations police officer, and she said, "Oh no, this is not proper. This should not be on your record," and they deleted it. So my record is clean now. I'll have you know. So anyone want to hire me? I'm cool. Yep.
What advice would you give to current generation devotees, like you, having seen the times when Prabhupada, it was an emergency situation then to spread Krishna consciousness. Today, you've been through all these phases. So what message would like to give?
Well, I think we've learned a lot. I mean, we went, my generation of devotee went through the pioneering stage. We were kind of meandering, you know, when it came to management of a society, etc. So the advice I would give now is we made all the mistakes. The mistakes are on us, and sometimes I've heard from younger generation devotees a lot of criticism about us and how we messed things up, etc. Okay, so we made the mistakes. So I would say, you know, please, when you make a mistake and you learn from that mistake, it's a lesson. So learn the lesson, do everything above board, honestly, in relationship to ISKCON and your own practice. Everything above board, you know, get the permits that you need, do the necessary documents, government documents that you need to get done, you know, as far as all of the particulars in terms of corporate, nonprofit, corporate work, obey what they say in terms of zoning regulations. You know, don't be a rebel. Don't use as an excuse, we don't have enough money. You know, insure the building, do all those things properly. That's on an ISKCON level. On an individual level is be a responsible person. And responsible person means if you're a grihasta, if you're married, have wife and child, that is part of your seva. And be responsible to that responsibility, both for the husband and the wife. Be very responsible to that position. That is part of your seva. You see your interaction with your family as part of your seva. That you know, you've been blessed with a partner who is practicing Krishna consciousness or facilitating your Krishna consciousness. and the souls that have been sent to you in the form of children. You've been given an opportunity to help them grow and advance spiritually. So do everything to your utmost to be a responsible husband, responsible wife, a responsible mother, responsible parent, a responsible citizen, responsible disciple, and do everything. A disciple, a devotee, one of the 26 qualities is expert. So be expert. Do everything expertly and with a heart full of love and devotion and honesty. That's the short version.
A short and a strong and a powerful version. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank
Anybody
you all.
else has any question?
I wonder, Essie, are you still out there? One of my friends, she came first time to Kirtan a number of years ago and has attended classes and
Essie texted me. She said she or he, she said that she'll leave early.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, anyway, she's always full of questions. That's why I wanted to make sure she was okay.
Is she from Puerto Rico?
She is Puerto Rican, but she lives in Paterson, New Jersey. And I met her at a kirtan I did in Montclair, New Jersey. It was actually her first experience with kirtan, and she just burst into tears.
Wow.
She had such a moving experience, and we've been friends for all these years now. I can't remember when that might have been 2011 or so. Yeah, it might have been that long ago. So we've been keeping in touch all these years, and she attends classes, kirtans when she can. She's a wonderful lady.
If you like, you could put her in touch with us. She's only 20 minutes from our center when we start.
Oh, good. That's right. Paterson and where you guys are is fairly close. I will tell her. If you could just text me or email me the address and the particulars about your Sunday program, and I'll get that to her.
Sure. Right now we're all virtual, but when we start in person.
Right.
All right. So it doesn't seem like there's any other question.
Okay.
Thank you. Rukmavati, did you just unmute? I just saw.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. So my question is, after the disappearance of Prabhupada, what kept you going throughout your whole life to practice Krishna consciousness? Because it is very difficult, very difficult when the spiritual master is not there, the guidance is not there, and how did you, cope up, or how did you manage to continue?
Well, Prabhupada said he's present in his books. That's why he, worked so hard and so diligently on these commentaries, these purports, the Bhaktivedanta purports. So the one way I keep enthused, encouraged, and feel empowered is by reading Prabhupada's books and, get a real sense of Prabhupada and his mission and what he wants me to do. Secondly, he's given me personal encouragement and instructions. I meditate on those and try to fulfill those instructions and live up to his encouragement and to feel this empowerment. That enthuses me greatly. The other thing I do is I selectively choose my association, in that with God brothers, God sisters, and other devotees, my God nieces and God nephews, who I genuinely respect the quality of their devotion. And like I said, I include not just God brothers and God sisters, I include, God nieces and God nephews. Here in Puerto Rico, I don't have a lot of God brothers here. I only have really one God brother and one God sister here. The God sister is older, so she doesn't come around that much. But I do have, friends and devotee friends of mine here that are much junior to me, much younger than me. You know, they may be 40 or 42. I'm 70. They may, a disciple of one of my god brothers, but I genuinely respect the quality of their devotion, and that gives me a great deal of encouragement and inspiration. So I do that. I associate with Prabhupada through his books. I try to watch, when I'm cooking sometimes, I'll play a Prabhupada Kirtan, a Prabhupada lecture, and keep in touch that way, and keep in touch with my god brothers, god sisters, and god nieces and nephews, and get inspired that way. And I'm a social person. I like people a lot, and particularly devotees of an equal mind who have dedicated their lives to this mission. I keep in touch with them, and that keeps my battery charged. And it's going to be 48 years. Yeah, it's 48 years now, and somehow or another, the battery charger is there, Srila Prabhupada, and I just have to keep plugging in.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji.
Yeah, you're welcome.